just how prevalent this issue is right now. Can you tell me about how you first got connected to wanting to bring this to light and showcase what horrifically is still going on? It's still impacting our society, sadly.
Yeah, I started researching and developing Always in Season for 2 years, in 2008 and 2009, before I started filming, and was really drawn into the story through the collection of lynching photographs and postcards called Without Sanctuary: Lynching Photography in America. And saw images that, of course, were haunting. There's a photograph of Laura Nelson, a woman who was lynched. She's hanging from a bridge across from her 14-year-old son, and there are spectators posing on the bridge really proudly, and they look like they might have been coming from church. They were really nicely dressed. And so my son was about that age at the time, and her son's chest reminded me of the size of my son's chest. And I was just floored. It was the first time that I started to think about the victims as anything other than anonymous, and often it was black men, so anonymous black men hanging. And so Laura Nelson's face and her clothing and her story drew me in to want to know more. And so I spent about 6 months looking just at the stories of the lynching victims, and wanting to understand the circumstances. I couldn't imagine the sense of betrayal that your community has turned on you in this way. And so I wanted to understand that better. And as I started to research, I started to realize, the spectators, they look like they could have been my neighbors, my classmates, my friends. And so I wanted to understand more about who they were. And so that's how I started. That was my inroads into starting to film with relatives of the perpetrators and victims of lynching, and looking at how they are on a grassroots level, looking at justice and reconciliation.
The title in particular, obviously reference to hunting, but the horror of this could have happened at any moment, at anything, for any small rationale for those grassroots people. Can you talk about wanting to showcase that this was something that happened so frequently that it's alarming?
Yeah, absolutely. On the continuum of tactics to maintain white supremacy, lynching was the ultimate tool of terrorism, and it meant that those events were often highly organized. People like to think about lynchings mythology. The mythology is that they happened in the middle of the night in the backwoods by backwards people, and lynchings often happened in the middle of the day on the courthouse lawn, which is usually the square in the center of town, where men, women, and children came out to watch lynchings. In 1916, 15,000 people, white men, women, and children, came out to watch a lynching in Waco, Texas, of Jesse Washington. And they photographed him as he was being brutalized over hours. And then he was lynched, and then people came and they posed proudly with his body. And those photographs were, like many, turned into postcards. And so you see a postcard from that lynching with a man on the front who is standing next to the body, his charred body, because they also burned him alive. And so you see him with an X over his head, and he sent that postcard to his mother saying, "This is the barbecue we had last summer, your son Joe." And so when you understand this is just one case of the nearly 5,000 lynchings that happened, so 15,000 people showed up for that one particular lynching. And so if you think about that times 5,000, and experts believe that the number is probably closer to 15,000, because that's just the number of those that were documented. Once you start to understand that, then you understand the scope of the terrorism. And so this film is really about helping people to know the details of lynching, because there was often cover-up and denial around the details. And so once you understand that, then you can better see what's going on now in our country. When you have, you can see the trail from the dehumanization of black people to people who immigrate into this country without documentation, and they're called aliens. And you can understand the power of that, and the danger of dehumanizing people, in addition to understanding what's going on right now in communities around racial violence. So I thought I had been filming for 5 years and thought I was finished, and came across the story of a 17-year-old named Lennon Lacy, who was found hanging from a swing set in Bladensboro, North Carolina in 2014. And I could imagine, my son was 17 at the time, and I could imagine how his mother could deal with that kind of trauma. And I knew, because I had been filming in communities where people were working around historic lynchings, I knew what they must be facing. And so I reached out to Claudia to learn more about what was going on there, and was just really struck by so many parallels between the horror that Blaytonboro was facing and what's gone on historically.
Can you talk about the freshness of the fact that I think, in old-time England, they would do the same thing. You watch a movie like Braveheart, and they do the same public killing for the whole town to see. But we're talking a generation ago, not even a generation ago, really, for a lot of these people, and what happened in 2014. It's got to be scary to realize that we're still so close to what's just happened.
Yeah, we are still so close. It's a really good point. One of the historic lynchings that I am featuring in the film is a 1946 quadruple lynching. 2 couples were killed on the Moores Ford Bridge in Monroe, Georgia. And I film with a diverse group of people who reenact that lynching. And they do that every year to make sure that the victims are never forgotten, and they believe some of the perpetrators are still living. But in 1946, my mom was alive. And so that is just a generation ago. And so we like to think of this as ancient history, and that we can somehow wall ourselves off from the history. But all of this is ever present. The institutions that made lynching possible, that were built upon racial inequity, and the same institutions that lynching helped to prop up and help to maintain, are the same ones that we're moving through daily. So policing, the legal system, the criminal justice system, there's mass incarceration, there's inequity in education. And so it really is all very relevant and very present. And it's really important that we feel what the terrorism was like, so that we can start to have more of a urgency for looking at these issues and really working in ways that we can all do to make these institutions more equitable.
The Super Bowl did a big thing to showcase some prominent civil rights people in Atlanta, and obviously people like Andrew Young and their voices are strong and well placed. But I feel like your movie showcasing that we haven't gone nearly anywhere near as far as what Martin Luther King thought, and certainly what even like Malcolm X and the other more radical folks were looking at. That this is something that's going to take generations to recover from. What are your hopes of seeing an immediate change? Is there something on the horizon, hopefully, as far as some type of recognition for a lot of these people? And I mean, since we're so fresh in it, how do you see what the next 5-10 years will be like?
Yeah, so the film is definitely about the terrorism, right? But it's also a film that has been very inspiring for me. There have been people who have been doing the work already, who were doing the work in 2010 when I first began filming, of confronting this history, looking at how they might recognize the victims, repair the damage, and bring healing to their communities. And that people are doing this on the ground, and at the time not knowing what was going on in other communities, right? When I worked with the reenactors, they didn't know what was going on in Duluth, Minnesota, where they built the first memorial to lynching victims in 1993. And so there's so much that has inspired me already. And then as we, as a country, have started to, the wonderful thing is that in the midst of really traumatic, horrific events that have been going on, like the murder of Trayvon Martin, the killing of Mike Brown, Renisha McBride, Eric Garner, all of these police shootings that have been just incredibly devastating for me personally and for this country. People are starting to awaken to wanting to better understand what's going on and to work for racial justice. And so at the same time that this film is can be really difficult, and certainly you can't make a film, or I couldn't make a film about lynching where the audience is comfortable the entire time. And so it's really important that we get out of our comfort zones and that we start to really face this history. And we're capable of it, and we're starting to do it. And there's one of the things that I filmed, one of the events that I filmed was the opening of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is a memorial in Birmingham that was erected directed by Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative that acknowledges lynching victims. And so that this is going on is quite remarkable. People came from all around the world for that. And in 2010, I could not have imagined that. And so there are many wonderful layers that I try to pull together in this film that are really complicated. And so one of those is the horror and the brutality, and another is the light and the love in which people show up for justice.
Just for those folks that don't know the way that museum is done, can you explain to the folks exactly what he was trying to show, and the fact that when you walk through it, it's one of the most visceral experiences you'll ever go through when learning about the lynching experience. Can you tell us a little bit about, for the folks that don't know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian Stevenson is in the film, and I filmed with him also when they collected the last soil samples from lynching sites in Alabama, and he really did a beautiful job of bringing together coalitions and bringing the community into investing in looking at their history. And so part of the memorial is displaying soil from the lynching sites across this country in jars at the memorial. And the other really beautiful and striking thing are the pillars that represent lynchings by county. And there are hundreds of pillars that really represent each of the lynching victims. And so as you move through the memorial, because of the way that it's constructed, you see the pillars from a certain point of view, which is just about eye level when you get in. And then as you move through and the floor declines, those pillars move up, and they represent the victims hanging. And so it's a really powerful thing. And the most powerful thing is that it gives you time to process it and time to be with your emotions and your thoughts, and gives you context. And so it's a wonderful sign that we are starting to look at this history, and there's more work to do.
What was it like hearing that you were going to be closing night here at Oxford, and knowing that Melanie really wanted this to be a statement to the ending of the festival?
It's incredibly special. I'm from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and so to be able to bring the film home to the state is just really powerful for me. And that it's closing night is just all the more special. And my mom is coming, and my family is coming, my sister and my nieces. And so it's a beautiful thing to share it with people in my homestay.
As far as how people can keep track of the film, but also help out in getting the word out, can you tell us how people can find it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a website called alwaysinseasonfilm.com. And if you go there, then you can get updated on when we're screening. We're doing festivals around the country. I feel like we have about 10 slated now, and they'll just increase. And so you can see when the film is coming to you, and also it'll ultimately air on PBS. And so you can find out the air date as well. So again, that's alwaysinseasonfilm.com.
Well, Jacqueline, thank you for having the courage to make this film and to bring this to light. I think it's one of those films that hopefully will make a big difference.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.